Hey guys, this is Gary. This video is about photographing stop action splash, water splash. And in order to do this, I'm going to use this fake pear. I'm going to drop it in a tank that's half full of water. The way all this is going to work is I'm going to use this device here. This is the Miops Smart Trigger. And I'm going to set it to laser mode. And in that mode, I'm going to shine a laser beam from this laser pointer right here into the lens on the Miops trigger. So when this pear breaks that laser beam, that will trigger this flash right here, which is a Yongnuo 560 Roman numeral 2. Which cost me $50. Unfortunately, it's discontinued, but I bought 2 of them. And the cool thing about this flash is that at 1/8 power, its flash duration, in other words, the amount of time that the light is visible is a mere 1/5000th of a second, which is definitely enough to stop motion. And then when this flash fires, it's going to fire this second Yongnuo 560, which is set to slave mode. So it's a pretty simple setup, but the reason I'm using the Miops trigger is because I can precisely calculate the amount of time it's going to take for this pear to break the beam, which is obviously above the tank, and then the amount of time it takes to travel from the beam to the surface of the water. And I've already done that. It turns out that it's 103 milliseconds. So that means I can program in a 103 millisecond delay so it won't trigger the flashes exactly when the beam gets broken, but 103 milliseconds after. That allows me to do this very consistently. You don't need to do it this way because this Miops trigger is, roughly $200. So that's a lot of money. You can do this without it, but you'd have to eyeball it and time the flash fire when you see the pear hit the water. Now, I've done it that way, and it's doable, but it's also pretty difficult. All right. So the first thing, which I've learned the hard way, is that the glass on the tank has to be as clean as you can possibly get it. So I wound up using this stuff. It's called invisible glass. And I made sure that I wiped it several times to just get it as clean and invisible, as the can says, as I could. So if you don't do that, every single smudge, every single dust particle will be really glaringly obvious in the resulting photograph because the light from the flash lights up everything. And it becomes very distracting. And it's possible that you could composite those spots out in Photoshop. It's also pretty labor intensive. So I'm trying to make this as efficient as possible. So if you do this, that's always going to be the first step. So now, once you've figured out if you are going to use a Miops trigger, once you've figured out the delay and the beam thing and all that, and you've cleaned this as much as possible, it's time to put the water in the tank. Okay, when you've got the tank half filled with water, chances are you're going to get some little droplets on the inside of the tank. You have to wipe those off too, because same deal. They're going to be distracting when you record the splash. And even worse, since you're not going to get it the first time probably, you're going to have to take many frames. And between each frame, you have to wipe down both the front and back because when the pear hits the water, the droplets will hit the inside of the glass. So it's a pretty tedious process. Okay. So now I'm ready to do my first pear drop, but I wanted to show you guys I can control the Miops Smart Trigger from my iPhone. But if you're like me, you don't read manuals, you would have assumed that when you make the change, like here it says delay 103, that's 103 milliseconds, you can easily change them with your finger. So I was changing the milliseconds, and the resulting photographs, the pear was always in the exact same spot too early. So I read the manual, and yes, in fact, you have to hit start, which sends the change to the trigger. So you need to know that. All right, so anyway, this app allows you to control the Miops trigger, and it's pretty cool. The camera I'm using is a 5D Mark II with a 70 to 200 millimeter lens. Here's a picture of the setup. So I'm shooting at 200 millimeters because I want to get the camera as far away from the water as possible. And I'm shooting at f/22 because here's really the key to the whole concept. Without the flash, my camera setting, which is f/22, ISO 50, and a 2-second shutter speed, and I'll explain why it's 2 seconds in a second, that gives me a black frame, a dark frame. So when the Miops triggers the flashes, that's the only light that's lighting the scene. Now, 2 seconds, because I need enough time to push the shutter button, drop the pair, and 2 seconds gives me enough of a cushion so all that can happen. If it was any less than that, the shutter might close before I actually get to dropping the pair. All right, so here we go. I'm going to test it. You can see when my hand breaks the beam, it fires the flashes. Okay, the next step is to just basically start doing it. All right, so yeah, I got a couple pretty decent images. Basically, I think I got 3 that are okay. So the next step is going to be to go into Lightroom and enhance them even more. But I want to explain a little bit about how to get the delay because I didn't really thoroughly explain that. So what you have to do, your first number is going to be a guess. I started at 90 milliseconds, and the picture I got was of the pair floating above the surface of the water. So obviously I needed more of a delay to give the pair a chance to travel farther down. So I just kept incrementing until I got to, well, now it's 104 because it placed the pair generally half in, half out of the water with a splash on top. So that was kind of what I was going for. All right, so the next thing is to go into Lightroom and enhance the photo even more. Here we are in Lightroom. This is the photo I picked to work on, but before we actually do that, let me just show you. This is a photo that I took before I really cleaned the tank. So you can see, I mean, and quite honestly, the tank looked clean to me just by eyeballing it, but flashes pick up every little speck of dust and dirt and smudges. So here was a photo I took after I cleaned the tank. It's still got some smudges on it, but not nearly as much. And also, this was before I got my delay set exactly right. The delay was still a little too short, so I was getting the pair just as it was hitting the water. And then it came down to a choice between this one and this one. I chose this one. All right, so let's go in the develop module. And so it's a little off axis, so I'm just going to take my crop and then drag to get the water surface to be parallel. All right, so now the rest of this is pretty straightforward. I'm going to make a black point. Something like that should work. And then my white point is pretty well set. All right, so I'm going to increase my highlights. Look at how much drama I get out of that splash. And what else? Maybe just a little bit of clarity and some vibrance. All right, so here's where we are, before, after. Now I'm going to take an adjustment brush with the exposure set to really dark, basically almost -3. And I'm just going to, with auto mask off, I'm just going to paint on the underwater part. And I'm also hitting kind of the edge of the pair, but I just want to show you a cool new feature in Lightroom. So range mask, I'm going to set it to color. I'm going to turn on show selected mask overlay. So now I can sort of fine tune my adjustment brush. So now I'm going to take my eyedropper and just drag here, and then you can see how the part that was encroaching upon the pear itself went away. And I can fine tune that by moving my amount slider to the left a little bit. So now the adjustment brush isn't touching the pear at all. So that's pretty good. All right, so now if I make my brush smaller, I can kind of get in here and not worry about hitting the pear thanks to the range mask in color. Okay, that's pretty good. All right, auto mask off. All right, so not bad, actually. Now I'm going to come up above the water line and do the same thing. I'm just going to paint very carefully and a little bit on this side, make my brush smaller. Sort of get in there. So that's really all you have to do. It's a pretty simple process. I'm not going to get rid of all these air bubbles. I think they're fine. Here's the before, here's the after. Before, after. All right. Now, a little bit here I'm going to try and get to here. I would say this is kind of, this isn't my best image. It's a little boring, I think. But the thing is, it's good practice. It's good, to do this every once in a while. You never know when a creative idea is going to hit you. And having done this several times now, I might be able to come up with a composite that could use these splash photos. All right, guys. So that's pretty much it. Simple process. Once again, one last time, before, after, before, after. All right, guys, see you next time.